on this channel, we make a lot of videos about why this camera or that camera is better for landscape photography. And a common comment that we receive on those videos is, well, isn't any camera great for landscape photography? And to be honest, they have a point. Landscape photography isn't the most demanding technologically of cameras. You don't need the fastest autofocus, you don't need the highest frame rate, but I do feel like there are a lot of specific things that can make one camera better than the other for landscape photography. So in this video, instead of talking about a specific camera or comparing specific cameras, I'm going to talk about generally what makes a camera good for landscape photography. And spoiler alert, there's not a camera out there that truly does all of these to perfection. When that camera comes out, I will let you guys know. So before I jump into my first 5 points, it would really be helpful if you would hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We have so much great photo, video, adventure content coming out, and it really helps these videos reach a wider audience. So we appreciate that in advance. All right, number 5 is maybe the least important, but one that I do really look for because I do probably about to a little over half of my shooting from a tripod. And I like a camera that's easy and fun to use from a tripod. So generally what this means is a good back screen with controls that you can use from the back screen, being able to change settings such as shutter speed, aperture, ISO, just by touching the screen is really nice for landscape photography when you're working on a tripod. The controls are designed for the camera to be in your hand. So it just makes sense to have nice, easy to use controls on the back screen. You also want a back screen that has accurate color, is fairly bright, and is fairly sharp so that you can see if a given shot is in focus, or kind of know what you're getting without having to, just stoop down and look in the viewfinder. This just isn't as optimal as a experience as the back screen is. So I also like a top LCD display, LED, LCD, I think it's an LCD. Display is nice for being able to reference settings. Again, like I'm looking down at the camera right now, I can just see a lot of my settings right there on that little screen. So that's really nice. Light up buttons, that's another really nice feature for tripods. So that's not very common. You don't get a lot of that. So, okay, so shooting from a tripod, the tripod experience, that's number 5. Okay, so number 4 is going to be accurate autofocus. Not necessarily super fast autofocus, doesn't have to have great tracking, but it needs to be accurate. So normally that means single point autofocus. It could mean contrast detect autofocus. I just am looking for accuracy. I know a lot of landscape photographers who manual focus everything. And I don't disagree with that approach. And I manual focus a lot of my work, if the situation calls for that. But I also really like being able to autofocus. I like being able to hand off the autofocus or the focus aspect to my camera, and I'm not stressing about whether it's super tack sharp, because I don't know about you, but when you manual focus, you always wonder if you could have gotten it a little sharper, even when you super zoom in. So I like being able to hand that off to the camera, but that only works if it's very accurate and you know that when you press that AF on button or half press the shutter that you're getting a sharp shot. So accurate autofocus, that's number 4. All right, number 3. And this is the one that's maybe going to be the most controversial or annoy the most people, but it's really important to me, and I have found over time that it's very important, and that is accurate color science. So a lot of people think that if you shoot in RAW, that you can make any photo have any color that you want. And that's partially true, but I have found over time that a good starting point with the color is absolutely critical to a great finished image. Color has just become more and more important to me over my career as a landscape photographer, and having very accurate color, or color at least that you like. I guess it doesn't have to be necessarily accurate. And you know, a huge reason for this is that, yeah, sure, you can do a lot of editing in post, you can really change how the color feels, but the more accurate that the color is going onto the file, the better starting place you have for when you start that edit. And also, it kind of gives you a more accurate representation of what you saw in the field, so that you can even make more creative choices. Our memories don't necessarily work as well as we think they will. We think we'll be like, oh, you know, I didn't have my white balance right, or the color science isn't great for this scene on this camera, but I'll remember exactly what it looked like. And then in your head, you're like, you get there and you're like, I don't remember. So accurate color science, that's number 3. All right, number 2, it's a huge gimme, but it is super important, and that's build quality and durability. We may not need, like I said before, the fastest autofocus or the highest frame rate, but we do need our cameras to be very reliable in various weather scenarios. As a landscape photographer is probably one of the hardest on their cameras as far as what they expect their camera to be able to do in the field, differing weather conditions. So build quality and durability, like it really is almost number 1. It just is super critical that your camera is going to be able to stand up to the elements and take a beating. You're also probably traveling with your camera, like you're going on airplanes, you're going on boats, you're going on, you know, various cars and stuff. That's hard on your camera. You need it to handle a lot of abuse. So that's number 2. Okay, number 1, and I'm really sorry to do this to you, but it's resolution and dynamic range. It's just so important to image quality, is just so important to landscape photography. And it's hard to debate that a lot of resolution and a lot of dynamic range is really important to the final output image. You get more detail, you get more cropping leeway, and you have the opportunity for bigger prints, which I feel like landscape photography translates to print as much or more than any other genre of photography. That doesn't mean that you need to go out, that doesn't mean like 100 megapixels is the minimum. Actually, I have found that about 40 to 45 is like where I like to start. 61, you can have problems, although on some of the newer 61 megapixel cameras, they've kind of solved a lot of those problems. So, and then if you do medium format, larger than full frame, you can get 100 megapixels, which is, you know, obviously very useful and great for landscape photography. So pretty much anything over 40 is what I'm looking for. I shoot a lot of panoramas, so I wind up with final images that are 100, 200 megapixel images at 40 megapixels. So you can kind of keep that in mind. This is the Nikon Z8, it's 45. There's a ton of 45 megapixel cameras out there to choose from, but it just is the most important factor when I'm looking at a landscape photography camera. If another camera had all of the other things, but I had an opportunity to camera with better resolution, I would choose it, because you're getting the final image is the most important thing to me, and that resolution is going to give you that. So, and you know, typically with landscape photography, a lower megapixel camera, you know, an advantage of a lower megapixel camera would be ISO. If I need to raise my ISO, I'm going on a tripod, like, and also my subjects aren't moving, so I can use shorter shutter speeds. So that's kind of where I'm at with the point number 1. However, I do want to make one final really important point. To make this point, really, I just want to tell you the story of one of the cameras that I've used, and a camera that may have come to mind for you as you're watching this video, and that's the GFX 100S. About a year ago, I tried that camera out, and on paper, it comes the closest to checking all of these boxes that I've talked about in this video. It's medium format, high resolution. It has a great tripod shooting experience. It's fairly weather sealed. The autofocus is good, but it has one big problem for me, and that is that a critical lens, the 100 to 200, a telephoto range, which I shoot a ton of telephoto shots, is not a very good lens. It has bad chromatic aberration, it's not that sharp, and when I was shooting with that lens, I wasn't even getting close to 100 megapixels out of the images, and the chromatic aberration was so bad, I couldn't fix it. It was one of the worst lens experiences I've had in years. So my point is that I had a perfect landscape photography camera pretty much, but I had a lousy lens to put on it, and that was a stopping point. So if you can't find a lens that works really well for your work, then that's probably not the camera for you. And I just feel like the lens, at the end of the day, so much is dependent on the quality of your lens to your quality of your final image, that it's kind of a 1B most important point. It's not really the camera itself, but it's a really important point to keep in mind. If this video was helpful to you in thinking about how to approach getting a landscape photography camera, or if you disagree and you think 24 megapixels or 12 megapixels is great for landscape images, please leave a comment below, like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next adventure.